Everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Got another news roundup coming for you guys today, as there's been a bunch of stuff posted over the last couple of days that I do want to talk about going into this weekend, and a lot of really cool stuff coming up, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. First and foremost, Riot have released another quick gameplay thoughts article, this time talking about their balanced champion releases and kind of talking about how well they've done. Now, if you don't remember, Riot have said they basically want all of their newer champions or rework champions to be balanced when they come out, as if they will be balanced a couple weeks down the road. So what this means is that they're not going to have the champion be ridiculously strong when they come out because people don't know how to play them, only to need nerf after nerf after nerf in subsequent patches when people finally do master them, right? Want the champion to come out and to be balanced by the time people have figured them out. So Riot sees themselves as being mostly on track. Fiddlesticks, Lilia, and Yone have all hit their targets for the most part. Fiddlesticks was one of the weird ones. They kind of said, yeah, there was a brief moment where Tank Fiddlesticks was gross, but we reacted quickly to it, and they think that they got him into a good spot. Lilia and Yone are the same deal so far. Now, Riot are still fairly uncertain at the moment because they're still relatively new, but they like where they're at currently, and they think they're doing an okay job of living up to the balanced framework. Volibear has been a bit of a mixed reaction. He had a fairly smooth launch. Riot gave him some panic buffs, basically, because they said he had a very slow win rate growth. And then he ended up being overbuffed, and now they've had to nerf him patch after patch. So he's been a little bit more mixed, and they basically said, we know we have to take it slower on big buffs, as opposed to just panic buffing a champion because he wasn't doing quite as well as we expected. So I do like that. I like that they admitted the fault, and I think it was correct to say that, yeah, Volibear was a little good. So I'm glad that they kind of acknowledged that, and that the other champions that they've been looking at have been gotten into a good spot. Now, Riot also talked a little bit about their preseason follow-up plans, as they mentioned that items are the big focus for this preseason, and that in its own could lead to some tremendous changes in the balance of the game. I talked about this already. This is potentially the biggest single change they could have made to League of Legends almost basically since I started playing the game back in Season 2. So this is a big deal. So they basically talk about what their focus is going to be and what they're going to try and maintain after the changes go through. Riot don't want any changes here to game length, snowballing, or laning phase duration. Riot really are happy with the roughly 30-minute average for games, with the occasional 50 to 60-minute epic length games. 30 minutes is actually significantly longer than I think a lot of people expected the game to be, so it's good to hear that that is still the average game. It is a little shorter than it was back in Season 3, Season 4, when the average was roughly 30 to 40 minutes, but I do think 30-minute is a good sweet spot of a game where you can come out, you can have some fun, there's a decent chance for champions to show their mettle at all stages of the game, without any one particular team just sort of dominating the other. Speaking of dominating the other, snowballing, right, really want at the 15-minute mark for games to be 40% even, with 35% of games to have a small lead in them and 25% of games to have a large lead in them. That means roughly 1 in every 4 games you play, someone will be snowballing on the other. But in most games, and 75% of games, Riot want a situation where one team is slightly ahead or teams are even. So that's a good place for Riot to try and balance too. Right, also want to maintain the 13 to 14 minute laning phase duration, which I think is generally fair. I think that's just about where it is at anyways, so I do quite like that. Right, I've also said they will be evaluating position power and class balance in order to make sure that no class of champions is particularly strong and that no position is able to carry the game, whereas no other position can do so. I think we all remember times where the only thing that matters is your bot laner or mid laner, right? Want to make sure that you can carry from anywhere on the map. They also said that they're developing a balanced framework for items, which I think is going to be quite interesting to see them do, as so far I think has had a good influence on their champion balance, so being able to evaluate items as well is good. Now, Riot did say specifically, we don't want to change items because we want the balance focus to be on champions instead. This kind of goes against the grain for that, but I think Riot might be walking back on that promise a little bit and saying, yeah, it was unreasonable for us to say we can just balance champions with never looking at the item system. So I think that's going to be fine, and I think as long as they have a framework for it, we should be in a good spot moving forwards. On to the big one here. Riot released a big dev blog talking about how they bounce for pro play, which is a bit of an interesting read if you're interested in how Riot try to make sure the world's meta shapes up. Primarily, Riot focuses on the big 4 regions, the LCK, LPL, LEC, and LCS, due to how the world seeding rules work. Primarily, they want to focus on presence, a champion that has a 95% pick ban or presence should get nerfed, whereas a champion with 85% presence over 2 consecutive patches should also get nerfed, as it means that they're still really good, but they're potentially not super, super broken. Riot also try to make sure that meta diversity at Worlds is 45% of champions in the game at 5% presence. That should mean that if Riot have done their math, there should be 67 unique picks at Worlds this year at a 5% presence. Now, this seems very difficult to get to. Like we said, that's a little bit less than half the roster with a 5% presence. So being played in not just one-off games, but being picked in multiple games, that could be quite difficult to do. But I do have faith that Riot are trying to make sure that these targets can be reached. And last year's Worlds did have a fairly healthy mix of champions, so I think that they do have a chance to get there. Now, Riot don't want any champions at 100% presence. They weren't able to quite get there last year, as Pantheon, unfortunately, was 100% pick ban at Worlds. So Riot are attempting to make sure that nothing like that happens this time around. Another interesting tidbit is that new champs have to be enabled for playoffs in all of the Big Four regions in order to make the cut for Worlds. What this means is that Lilia will be enabled for Worlds, but Yone will not be. So you can give up seeing the Unforgotten at Worlds, unfortunately, but there's a big chance that we can see some Lilia jungles or potentially some Lilia top lanes at Worlds as well. This is also the reason why the Lilia changes were pulled from the PBE. Riot had some nerfs to her minion damage lined up, but they decided against them because of the fact that she would be enabled for Worlds, and they don't want to unduly nerf or buff the champion when there is potential for her to show up. Riot also talked a little bit about trying to increase diversity in each position, with at least 10 viable picks per role being the goal, which seems a little large, but there have been a fair number of picks that have been options in playoffs, so I do think this is a reasonable thing to go for. This is actually why a lot of champions that we didn't expect needed buffs got buffs. So Caitlyn, Misfortune, Jackson, Fiora were a lot of the champions that we were kind of like, why are these champions getting buffs? That doesn't make any sense. But it's essentially because Riot were trying to expand diversity. With the AD or the Poke Varus nerfs that were a couple patches ago, Riot were concerned that mid to late game AD carries like Kai'Sa or Aphelios would just kind of be the default picks at Worlds because there'd be no reason to play anything else, and because Varus kind of held them in check. So that's why Caitlyn and Misfortune received buffs in order to give teams the option of bullying these mid to late game picks with somebody like the Caitlyn and keep them from scaling and put a little bit more interest into drafts then, because you can say, well, if we know we want the Kai'Sa, we may have to ban the Caitlyn, but do we also ban the Misfortune? Do they play Misfortune? That sort of a thing. In a similar vein, Jackson Fiora were buffed in order to try and add split pushers to the mix of top lane champions, which is fairly broad already with a lot of lane bullies, some mid-game tanks, and then some late-game scaling picks with stuff like the Kayle. So adding some split pushers to the mix as well should enable a wider variety of playstyles and strategies. It sounds like Riot have a good focus on what they're going to be doing in the future here for Worlds, so I have a little bit of faith in them to be able to get it into a good spot, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how things shake up once Worlds finally does go on. Next up, Malzahar, Victor, and Nocturne are getting some visual updates. I will, of course, have the tweets linked down in the description below, so you should be able to check those out. I'm really, really excited, actually, for these changes. I think it's going to be really interesting, especially Nocturne. His Legends of Runeterra reveal did actually show up recently, so I really do want to see this champion kind of match more with his card in the game as well. So, and it also is exciting because Nocturne was one of those champions that Riot were saying, hey, we know we are going to be trying to give this champion a VGU at some point. So with both the VGU or the visual updates and the Legends of Runeterra card, it kind of sounds like Riot are sort of testing the waters potentially for Nocturne and saying, where do we want to take this champion in the future? So I'm excited, but also Malzahar and Victor, they both look amazing now that they have those particle effects updates, but definitely go check those out if you're interested. Moving on, TFT Fates has been announced as the next set. Now, obviously, this is a very broad, general teaser sort of announcement just to get people excited for the next set. The post itself, as Riot does, they always hint at stuff that's going to be coming in it. So they've talked about Divines, Tormented, Spirits, Phantasms, Fortunes, and Chosen as potentially being the classes of champions or the origins of champions in the coming set. So there's not a lot we can do to think about it, but it may give some indication of the kinds of champions that we will be seeing in the new set. So we can already kind of think of Divines. Well, we have a bunch of God King skins or God Fist skins, so there's a potential for seeing champions like Lee Sin or Jax or potentially Garen and Darius make an appearance in this set. It does seem to be more of a fantasy theme, which is a good swing back from the TFT Galaxies that we were just in. I think it does make sense for Riot to try and bring the pendulum back more towards the fantasy, especially given that lots of champions have fantasy-themed skins or default a fantasy character, whereas Galaxies was a little bit more restrictive in what you could introduce. So I do like this. Just a quick tinfoil hat theory, Phantasm is very similar of a name to Phantom, which could indicate that the Phantom trait from the original TFT set could come back in some modified form, so you guys can speculate about that all you want. Either way, I'm excited for the new set, as I'm a little burnt out on Galaxies after, you know, months and months of playing that set, so a change of pace will be very, very interesting. And last but certainly not least, KDA, the band, is going to be coming back. That's right. Riot have tweeted out that on August 27th, KDA will be returning with a new single called The Baddest. So we can definitely all be looking forward to that. I know a lot of people are really, really excited about KDA, myself included. They still have had such a huge presence on Spotify and YouTube with the one song they made as a digital artist, which is hilarious. So the fact that Riot were able to hopefully get the whole group back together and make another song is really, really cool. I know they also kind of talked about having 6 different artists available at Worlds this year to perform. Obviously, things are a little thrown out the window, what with COVID, but the fact that they were still able to get the KDA song means that potentially we could see True Damage come back. We might be able to see artists like Pentakill come back. Either way, we're really excited, and I can definitely say that we're looking forward to The Baddest. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what you're most excited for down in the comment section below. For me in particular, I'm excited for Worlds after talking about all the changes, but I know a lot of people are going to be looking forward to the new KDA single. So either way, let me know down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.